We see it in Jesus and praise it in Jesus, but if anyone else dares to show love to that extent, we think they're stupid. We're often found trying to talk them out of it. Okay, Genesis 18. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great tree of Mamre. And verse 4 goes on to say, "You may wash your feet and rest under this tree." It shouldn't be overly surprising for us to see this God, the God who was betrayed at a tree, the God who denied us access back to the tree of life, a God who was crucified to the world and the world to him on a tree, and who will end it all one day by bringing it full circle back to the tree of life. Shouldn't be surprising at all to find God beginning his redemptive conquest with Abraham, and once finding a man he can trust, communing with him under a tree. Perhaps I make too big a deal out of these trees, but they do provide a wonderful visual for what's taking place here. And Genesis is the book that you'll remember first alerts us to the trees, so maybe not such a big deal after all. In chapter 15, I made a deal in regard to the friendship between Abraham and God, the friendship that existed between them. And there's nothing here in chapter 18 that would suggest that I overplayed my hand in those comments. On the contrary, so a few more remarks on this human-divine relationship, and it's worth a few more comments considering that famous passage in James 4 where it states all of this, but it states it in the negative. I imagine because stating things negatively often strikes a stronger chord, sometimes depending on who we're addressing and why. But James writes, "Don't you know that friendship with the world is hatred toward God? Therefore, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God." Well, the last thing any of us would want here, I'm sure, is to be God's enemy. We want to be like Abraham here when we witness a friendship going on between the divine and the human. We ought to be all ears and all eyes, trying to figure out what that looks like, what it sounds like. So suffice to say, if friendship with God isn't something that we above most things treasure, in fact, that he would call us his friend, if that doesn't blow our minds, then I'm suggesting that perhaps some familiarity has already bred some contempt. I have a few friends who, if you gave me a second, I'll bore you to death with stories about them, about us. Because, well, truth be told, I'm proud to have them as my friends. And given a chance, I'll boast that they're my friend. Have you met my friend, God? It's almost too ridiculous to contemplate. And it only gets worse when we know that, given the opportunity, that is precisely how he would introduce us. Have you met my friend Ken? This is my good friend Roger. Oh, Matthew? Yeah, he and I are friends. And if you've already read the chapter, which hopefully you have, then you'll already know that when the three visitors arrive, Abraham immediately adopts friendship, waits on them hand and foot, water is fetched, bread is baked, a calf is chosen, and prepared for food. They converse like friends, even to the extent of God not allowing Sarah's faithless remark to go unchallenged when she laughs at the thought of being pregnant at her age, thus daring to doubt God's ability. And if someone says, well, that's a bit unfair, surely, or maybe Sarah was rather doubting herself, doubting her physicality, advanced in years and told she's going to give birth. But you'll remember that I said a few weeks ago that when it's God who has made us the promises, then doubting ourselves is doubting God. For it's to us He made the promise. And God's response to Sarah clears up any doubt. When God says, is anything too difficult for the Lord? He lets us know that God believed that Sarah was doubting Him, His power, or more appropriately, His ability to keep His word. So friends meet, and friends eat, and friends converse. By the end of the meal, God will say, shall I hide from Abraham my plans for redecorating Sodom? And when Abraham hears what's in store for his nephew Lot, Abraham and God go at it, but they go at it like friends. In fact, Abraham's respectful boldness should be heartwarming for us to read, particularly in view of how God responds to him. And we don't hear a thunderous response because God's delighted. He was obviously delighted with Abraham here. You don't think the God who delights in mercy is smiling as his faith in Abraham is confirmed by Abraham's pleas and protests for mercy? Wouldn't the God who takes no delight in the death of the wicked be overjoyed to have found someone who appears to think similarly? And so Abraham goes to bat for Sodom, and does so by appealing to the integrity of God's own character. Lord, you can't destroy Sodom. That would be to treat the wicked and the righteous alike. Far be this from you. Whatever else Abraham has thus far learned about God, God's fairness, God's justice, it appears is something that Abraham has come to understand as dependable. So much so it becomes the foundational springboard for Abraham's entire argument. Lord, if you treat the righteous the same way you treat the wicked, that will be out of character for you. There must be at least 50 righteous people down there who don't deserve to be treated the way you're about to treat the wicked. Surely a remnant is worth saving, even although the vast bulk of them have rejected you. And God's response is no thundering, how dare you question my authority or my judgment. God's nose isn't put out of place. Sometimes because we're so petty, we end up believing that we have a God like that. God is nothing like us. No thundering rebuke at all. God listens. God hears. God responds like a friend. Okay, son, all right. If there are 50 righteous people, as you're telling me that there are, I'll spare the city. As though God doesn't know, right? It's a little bit like, where are you and what have you done in the garden? It's not as though God doesn't know. Thank you, says Abraham. And then Abraham gets to thinking, undoubtedly calling to mind some of the rumors that he's heard over the past few years as Sodom's reputation leaks out into the surrounding countryside. Well, actually, Lord, if you don't mind, I was thinking I might have, in my haste, in my eagerness, I might have overstated things a little there, and I would hate to be defeated here on a technicality. There's a chance that there might only be 45 righteous people. Surely a difference of 5 wouldn't be enough for you to take me literally. God says, all right, I get it. 45's the number. And Abraham thinks a little bit more. Or, what about rounding it off? No one likes odd numbers. Let's round it off. And we can't round it up because that would be to round it to 50. So let's round it to 40. If there's 40 righteous people, deal? God, undoubtedly smiling through the whole encounter, says, all right, 40 it is. Well, and just because we're already at the negotiating table here and we got things underway, 30 is only less than 10 less than 40. They're practically the same number. Okay, 30, I'm fine with 30. Really? Well, if you're fine with 30, you would be equally as fine with 20, right? All right, Abraham, for the sake of 20, my friendship with you, 20's the magic number. Oh, if it's magic numbers we're talking about, what about 10? 10's always been my magic number. I might be playing a little bit loose with the original language here, but you get the point. Of course, in settling for 10, settling for 10 was Abraham's downfall. Abraham had overestimated the goodness within Sodom. As a side note, the world has often suffered because the righteous fail to recognize evil and call it for what it is. We can often conflate condoning something with being patient, and we'd rather be seen to be virtuous in being patient than being righteous and being condemning. So we favor patience. I'm sure his children were being sacrificed to Molech all over Israel's kingdom. There would have been people all over the kingdom arguing in favor of Molech. Well, they're not really that bad. The children probably weren't even wanted anyway, so why not become more prosperous at their expense? We're patient, you see. We want to show patience. However, as it turns out, the talk between Abraham and God is just that, it's talk. But even from Abraham's point of view, because as Abraham has already established in verse 25, Abraham says something that becomes a pillar within the biblical text and something that undergirds our entire faith in God, that the judge of all the earth will do right. But if Abraham has heard some of the tales of old, then he must know that God is a God of garden banishment, of tower toppling and world flooding proportion. He must already know that the God he is speaking with loves the human family too much to tolerate a cancer that would threaten to destroy it. And if Abraham has a good understanding of love, then he already knows that love is not weak. Love is strong. Love does what it has to do. not what it wants to do. Love isn't patronizing. Love, as Paul reminds us, always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. It doesn't pander. For love is strong. Sometimes, from the outside looking in, we might see a woman, for example, who is so badly treated by her husband that not a single soul on earth would advise her to stay with him. In fact, everyone she does know advises her the opposite, to get away from him. And yet stay she does. And all the friendly advice in the world is useless, as well-meaning as it is, because it's too late for advice. She loves him. As brutish and as harmful as he is, as ugly as his behavior is, she loves him. It doesn't matter to her that outsiders can't understand that depth of love, that someone would hold on even in the face of terrible personal suffering, and that she has chosen that this is her body given to him. It wouldn't matter to her that the world, even Christians, would fail to see the Christ likeness in it because they can't advise it. It's no surprise to find such women surrounded by such advice, because very few of us have a sincere grasp of self-sacrificing love. Most of us have love up to a point, except perhaps when it's our children. Oh, we see it in Jesus. We see Jesus laying his life down for the brutes of this world. We see Jesus refusing to let go of the renegades, even as they nail him to the cross. We see it and we praise it when we see it in him. Wouldn't we advise him to say, get away from them? But it's too late. He loves them. And if laying down his life as a chance of saving them, that's what he's chosen, well, what if it won't save them? It doesn't matter. That's what he's chosen. He loves them. Well, he's stupid dying for someone that doesn't care about him. Is he? It's not about argument. It's about love and the giving of oneself for someone else. We see it in Jesus and praise it in Jesus, but if anyone else dares to show love to that extent, we think they're stupid. We're often found trying to talk them out of it. We don't love the woman's husband. We don't love him. In fact, the more she tells us about him, we hate him. So it's easy for us to find language that would convince her to leave. She does, though. She genuinely does. Or maybe it's not him at all. Maybe it's the children. Maybe she's already calculated that moving would be even worse for them. That the brute has threatened her, if he takes the children, he'll find them. And so her love for her children is what's forcing her to lay her life down. Many a night throwing herself over the top of them so that she gets the beating. We see it in Jesus, we praise it in Jesus. It turns up in actual humanity, we don't know what to do with it. And instead of thinking, maybe I need to listen here, maybe there's something I could learn, we write them off as stupid. We often do with love what we do with faith whenever confronted by someone who possesses a lot of it. We just consider them stupid. We don't dare consider for a second that they might actually be right and we be wrong. By the end of the chapter, we'll see that Sodom didn't even possess 10. And so God pulls on his surgical gloves and removes this cancer from the human family. But this, Abraham knows, his God will do what is right and fair. And he knows this in spite of he himself wandering around for decades, promiseless. Even although he himself has yet to receive the promises that God promised him, this God, says Abraham, can be trusted to do what is right. He's a good man, Abraham. I think we'd like him. I think he embarrasses a lot of the time, perhaps, but I think we'd like him. And this God of his, a God that will do what is right. What a relief. Any of us tossing and turning each night, anxious over the welfare of our children and their eternal situation. Abraham's here tonight to remind you, your God's going to do what's right. God will do what's right. And if the final judgment is anything like the rest of the book, if the final judgment is anything like the 3.5 years Jesus spent with us, then I guarantee you the final judgment is going to contain a couple of doozies. You can't tell me that Jesus, who spent all his time with us, demonstrating to us that what we thought was up was actually down, what we considered was first is actually last, and that the least were the greatest, turning our entire theologies and ideologies on their head. You're never going to convince me that God still doesn't have a few surprises in store. Especially for those of us, who already have it all sussed out. You understand? And we, by our quoting of many texts, will guarantee who's in and who's not. Oh, brethren, when it comes to your children, you should toss and turn less than you do and trust your God. But what good is that? What good is that advice to you tonight? It's too late. You love them. I wouldn't have a snowball's chance in hell of convincing you not to worry about your kids. Your entire life has been invested in them. And what? Advice from a mad Scotsman is going to convince you otherwise? Even although while you see the truth of it, it's too late. You love them. But he loves them too. And he's going to do what's right. And I don't want to offer anyone false hope, but neither will I rob them of the God of all hope. You know and I know that people are sinners. God knows why they're sinners. You know and I know that people appear to have rejected him. God knows whether or not that's true. And if it is true, he knows why. You know and I know that the Bible says this and the Bible says that. God knows. God knows. and the judge of all the earth will do right. No one is going to leave the judgment seat of God, either to the left or to the right, able to say, well, that wasn't fair. That wasn't right. And given the life of his Son, who shined like a spotlight in a cave, a life that stretched his hand toward sinners, a life that championed the weak, a life that blew gently upon smouldering wicks, a life that declared forthrightly, loudly, and as often as we allowed him, that we have a God who loves us, that we have a God who can be trusted. And we watched him, did we not? Didn't we watch him trust his Father? Didn't we? How'd that turn out for him? Name above all names, that at his name every knee shall bow. That's how it turned out for him. That life, I submit to you, offers us, and not just us, great hope. And I don't think believing that should encourage us to work any less in our efforts to save those around us. But I'll be damned if I'm going to believe that the God of heaven and earth is bound or restricted by my feeble efforts or my imperfect interpretations of his perfect word. So given half a chance, we'll mention our heavenly friend to anyone around us who has an ear to put up with us. And we'll advise them, and we'll encourage them, and we'll even warn them if we judge that to be effective. And as long as they allow us, we'll talk to them about this friend of ours, who above all things can be trusted. Thoughts, comments, questions?